everybody. So this video is about me kind of trying out a tiny wheel. So I basically bought one off of Amazon. Not the super expensive ones, but not the super cheap ones either. It's kind of in between as far as price goes for a tiny wheel. And I bought it because, one, I've just been making tiny things. I've just been normally like throwing off the hump. So you get like a big piece of clay, put it on the wheel, and then just center it and pull the walls and stuff with the tiny pieces a little at a time and just, you know, wire them off. And that's how I have been making my tiny pieces. But I thought it might be kind of fun to try a tiny wheel to see if it's any easier, any harder, whether, you know, it's just better to do throwing off the hump, or whether I prefer it on a tiny wheel. The other thought I had was, I do a lot of shows, like art shows. I do artist spotlights at From Here. So we're kind of required to go in and kind of show what we do and show how we make our art. It's a big store, but it's not like big enough for a pottery wheel to be taken to, really. So the tiny wheel would allow me to do like wheel throwing and stuff for the customers without necessarily having to, you know, lug my big one down there. So that was kind of another thought I had, was I could use that, or I could use it for shows where I might not have a lot of room or a lot of space, but I do kind of want to show my craft. So those were kind of my ideas when I was thinking about doing this and getting the tiny wheel. And then I just honestly wanted to know whether or not it would be easier to make tiny pots or not. So I will make sure to link it below in the description of this particular wheel that I got. I got this one, and I can't remember the like name of it off the top of my head, but I promise I'll put it in links below. I'll put like a little tag right here showing what it's called. So it has this dial that controls the speed. It has on off, and this is where you plug it in with the cord. So it does come with a cord. So the cord isn't very long, which I've kind of run into a little bit of being a problem with taking it places and trying to have it plugged in. So you probably will need an extension cord to be able to like plug it in where you need to plug it in. It's not often you have an outlet that's like right next to you. And this cord really isn't, like, it's okay, but it's not, I don't feel like it's long enough. So I did want to say that. But yeah, so I got this guy, 3 different wheel heads. So this is the biggest wheel head. This one is the smallest wheel head. So you can kind of see, like, it's not even as big as my finger for the width. And then this one's the medium one, which is the one I use the most. So it's about the length of my finger, and I have small hands. So, so yeah, and it is pretty easy. It does come with like a little Allen wrench thing, and you know, you can put it in there and undo the wheel and change it. But I generally only use this medium-sized one. The other thing I wanted to say is it doesn't have a splash pan, so be aware of that. It does kind of make a little bit of a mess. I usually, when I did it at the From Here store, I kind of sat a little bit further back, and then, you know, had the width of the table to kind of... So yeah, I did want to say that it doesn't have a splash pan. I might like just make one out of like a plastic container or something just in the future, so I don't have to worry about it as much with it, you know, with the splatter. It doesn't make a ton of splatter. It's not like all over the place, because again, you're just using a little bit amount of clay and a little bit of water, but it does make it a little bit messier, just because it doesn't have a splash pan. So I will say that. And then the funny thing is too, is I got in the wheel expecting to have like the 3 wheel heads and stuff like that, but they actually sent me a lot of just random pottery tools along with it. I'm not sure if they do it for every order or they just did it for mine, but yeah, so I ended up getting a rib. Obviously it's a little big for working with tiny pots. I mean, I guess you could maybe make it work, but a little big. Also, these guys are a little big too, that I'm probably not going to be using them much with the tiny pieces on the wheel. And then I did get a needle tool though, so that was pretty cool. I do like these metal ones, and I tend to lose them, so I was excited about that. It also came with a sponge and a bunch of brushes. And they were kind of like hidden underneath everything, like at the bottom of the styrofoam container that it came in. So I'm not sure if they meant to send me a bunch of brushes, but that was kind of cool. I ended up getting like a bunch of pottery tools that, I mean, I'll probably end up using for like my regular pottery. They're not going to really help me much with the tiny wheel, but I did want to say that just in case, you know, you're looking at, you know, trying out a tiny wheel, or, you know, looking at this one in particular. You might end up with a lot of pottery tools that aren't really useful for the tiny pieces, but that you might be able to use otherwise, for like hand building or big wheel throwing. So here we have, some of them warped a little in the kiln. I did kind of fire it to a lower temperature because I knew they didn't need as much being so small. But you can kind of see that one worked a little there. But these were all made on that tiny wheel that I got. I think I might need to make them a little thicker though going forward when I'm throwing on the tiny wheel. Cute little teacup. I just love this glaze. That really dark purple is pretty. Got another little mug. It's cute. And this one turned out pretty good. I don't see a ton of warping on this one. Yeah. But yeah, so, you know, it's all experimentation. Usually when I've made tiny pieces, I've thrown off the hump. And I will say it is easier for throwing. I usually can make a lot more pieces in the amount of time if I do off the hump on the big pottery wheel. But as far as like putting them together and trimming them and things like that, it's a lot faster to just have the tiny wheel. You know, I prefer to have the throwing take a little longer and have pieces pretty much done by the time I'm taking them off the wheel, or whether or not I prefer, you know, making a ton and then putting them all together later. I don't know. Because, like, when you throw them on the wheel, the tiny wheel, you can kind of just put them together then and there, and they'll stick to each other and stuff because they're the same dryness. So I found that was a lot easier. But then again, I am kind of getting a lot more warping with these tiny pieces compared, like, on with the tiny pieces I'm throwing on the tiny pottery wheel. I'm getting more warping than if I just do it off the hump. So plus and minuses. Part of it too might just be that I need to practice more. I haven't had a ton of practice on a tiny wheel, and it is a lot different throwing wise than it is like on the big wheel. Even just throwing off the hump, it's just centering is kind of a lot different because you're not using your whole hand, you're not using a lot of force. Like, you kind of have to be careful with how much pressure you use compared to like using a big pottery wheel. But yeah, so if you have any questions about the wheel in particular, or which one I got, why I got it, things like that, feel free to drop them in the comments, and I would love to share my thoughts with you. I do like that it is portable and that I can do it when I'm doing my shifts, you know, doing the artist spotlight it from here. Like, I do think that's fun. I think it's more interactive. I got a lot more questions, a lot of people coming up asking me about things, which was cool. So I'm definitely glad I got the little pottery wheel, but it definitely is a little bit of a learning process. And, you know, there's plus and minuses to it versus just throwing off the hump on the big wheel. But for me, I think the biggest thing for me with having the tiny wheel is that I can take it to places and I can do it in front of people and stuff. Like, I could even take it to art shows if I wanted to and do a little bit of tiny throwing there without it making a huge mess. I mean, for the Ren Fair, I definitely will still do my kick wheel. Just because they don't really have any electricity and stuff, and it's kind of, you know, you're doing things the way they used to do things. But like, for like the art shows, you know, that aren't Renaissance or historical shows, I think it might be kind of fun to be able to have the tiny wheel. And then certainly when I'm doing my artist spotlights, and I usually do those about once a month at the From Here store. So yeah, I had fun. I enjoyed it. I even took it to my kids' class and had one of the kids there try it. A lot of the other children weren't there, so I brought it, and we just kind of did some fun throwing and was kind of teaching her how to throw on the wheel, but not have a, you know, the big one, which can kind of be more intimidating. She had a lot of fun doing the tiny wheel and the tiny pots and got quite a few of them, so that was exciting. It was kind of fun to just see how it went and how the pieces turned out. And I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!